Obviously, on his first day on the job, President Trump signed an executive order. The U.S. government only recognizing two genders, male, female. They're unchangeable. If elected as prime minister, is that something that you're going to kind of walk in line with, or what are your feelings on that executive order?
Well, I don't know. Do you have any other genders that you'd like to name?
Me personally?
What a savage Pierre Poilievre is. He has absolutely cooked him there. That part of the interview has gone viral today, but I think there's really a lot more to this interview than just this viral clip. Most of the channels that have talked about this interview have kind of focused on that viral moment, but I've got more to say about this interview. Right off the bat, I've got to say, I think this is probably the best interview I've seen of Pierre Poilievre. Certainly one of the best. For a while, I think people have concluded that Pierre Poilievre is just about slogans, but we're starting to see more detail now from Pierre. Not only does he go a little deeper into his policy positions in this interview, but he also talks a bit about his stance on social justice issues as well. And I mean, it was a short interview too. It was just 10 minutes. So today, what I think I'll do, I'm going to break down what he said in this interview with CTV News this morning. So let's get started. Don't worry, we'll talk about the viral moment as well, but I really want to get into some of the other things that you might have missed just listening to this interview.
If elected as prime minister down the line, whenever that election is, what would your strategy be to work with President Trump?
Well, first and foremost, we would unfortunately and reluctantly have to retaliate against tariffs applied to our businesses. And then we would go to the grassroots American economic interests that are on our side. The union leaders and business owners in the Midwest that use Canadian energy. We would go to the U.S. states that buy our electricity, the major exporters of the $50 billion of manufacturing equipment and machinery that Canadian companies buy from Americans. We go to those vendors and say, listen, we need a free trade deal that allows us to exchange our goods and services without tariffs because it's in your interest. And that kind of pressure from the ground up will, I think, help convince President Trump to make a deal that will be both good for Canada and the United States. He is, after all, a deal maker.
Okay, so I really love Pierre's emphasis on making a deal here and the idea of applying pressure from the grassroots. Those American partners in the Midwest that use our energy, really get to those people and convince Trump to back down on his tariffs. You might have also heard in that clip that he spoke about our over-reliance on the United States. Something like 75% of our exports in 2023 went to the U.S. Now, I don't know off the top of my head what the 2024 number was, but 75%. Just think about that. He doesn't mention it in this interview, but in a separate interview, he's talked about building pipelines to get our energy and our goods to the rest of the world. Now, all of that said, I don't think his point of view here is very original. I like the point of view, as I said, but I don't think it's very original. The current strategy the Trudeau government is pursuing to tackle the Trump tariffs includes retaliatory tariffs against Republican states in the U.S. And the key emphasis there on the Republican states. So those are states you'd expect to have some influence in Trump's inner circles, right? And we also know at this point that they're not prioritizing tariffs against the blue states because I think we know Trump won't give a flying duck about that, right? So this is very similar to what Pierre Poilievre is proposing here. Also, the other thing, on diversifying our economy to limit our over-reliance on the U.S., again, it's a brilliant idea. But if we're being fair here, the Trudeau government bought the Trans Mountain Pipeline to do exactly that. For all the criticism that the Trudeau government has received on hampering Canadian oil and gas, and they have hampered oil and gas, it has to be said, they did buy a pipeline, right? They bought the Trans Mountain Pipeline for $4.5 billion, no less, right? Now, that pipeline would have taken oil from Alberta to Burnaby, and obviously from Burnaby to the rest of the world, including the United States, of course. That pipeline expansion only came online in 2024. You guys could read up on the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion and all the protests and concerns expressed by First Nations and environmentalists. I'm not going to get too far into that in this video. So all I'm saying here is that this idea that Pierre is putting forward is not necessarily novel. It's not new. What I really wanted to hear from Pierre Poilievre here is some specifics. Maybe that'll come later. I don't know. But let's move on.
The premiers met with, outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. They were all there in Ottawa, minus the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, was in Mar-a-Lago. She is seemingly not wanting to sign this deal with the rest of the premiers. She wants to protect the oil in Alberta. How do you make sure everyone's copacetic? Everyone, you talked about Canada first. How do you work with the premiers right now to make sure they're all on the same page?
Well, you need a strong prime minister for that. Can you name one governor that's been leading the charge on the American side of this?
No.
No, because the states, the separate states, are not all speaking different messages. They have one strong, nationally elected leader with a new mandate. And on this side, we have a weak, effectively former prime minister who's thoroughly discredited and widely unpopular. He has no credibility with anyone. And then you have a squabbling group of other liberals fighting for political power. That's left a vacuum. So effectively, we have 10 foreign ministers in the form of premiers who are all running around saying different things. What we need is a axe the tax election now, so we can elect a strong government that will take back control. Yes, take back control of overspending and taxes, inflation, immigration, all of that, but also take back control of our diplomatic stance and go to Washington with strength to put Canada first. And that is what I will do as soon as we get the election done.
You talk about the tax, the carbon tax election. It seems like
Okay, before we get into the carbon tax there, I thought this part was hilarious. He really just did Justin Trudeau so dirty here. Like, he has continued to take Justin Trudeau's lunch money every single day since he became Conservative Party leader. So I think one thing that kind of flies under the radar here, and you might not have caught it because he said it kind of under a bunch of things, and I don't know if you heard it, but he spoke about America having a strong, unified message on tariffs. Essentially, irrespective of whether people agree with Trump's tariffs on that side or not, none of the governors is coming out here like none of them is doing a Danielle Smith, right? Right? It's subtle what he says here, but clearly Canada needs a united front to confront the Trump tariffs. And he recognizes, and this is important, but in the end, he blames Justin Trudeau and the fact that he has basically held the country hostage in a sense by proroguing Parliament. Anyways, let's move on.
People who are throwing their names in a leadership race, whether it's Mark Carney or Christian Freeland, who CTV News has learned that she's not going to have the carbon tax reportedly part of her platform.
You sure about that?
Well, we'll see. We'll have to see. She came in here and we chatted with her. But do you feel like you might have to pivot a little bit the message? Maybe not an axe the tax, maybe switch it to something else, or you're not buying. You're shaking your head. You're not buying that.
You're telling me. So let's start with Freeland.
Yeah.
She's been Justin Trudeau's finance minister, administering the carbon tax. She raised the carbon tax by 167%. She bragged that she raised the carbon tax during an inflation crisis. And then you have carbon tax Carney. This guy says the carbon tax is too low. And yesterday, he just won the endorsement of the crazy carbon tax minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who has said he would resign from the Liberal Party if they ever got rid of the carbon tax, which means that Carney has made a deal with him that they will pretend that the carbon tax has been put aside until after the election. And then if they win, not only will they bring it back, they will raise it higher than ever before. These are lying liberals. They cannot be trusted when they come to you after raising the tax for 9 years and having passed a law to quadruple it up to 61 cents a liter. A few days before the election, come to you and say, oh, whoops, we made a mistake. We're going to suspend that. You know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to bring it back. They're going to raise it higher than ever. Don't trust the lying liberals. There's only one party that has always said and will always do one thing: axe the tax.
Okay, before we move on there, I I absolutely, I love how the carbon tax has become the symbol of the liberals' decline. Like everybody's disowning the carbon tax like it's some troubled kid like that. Anyways, I think this particular turn on the carbon tax is really great marketing by Pierre, if anything. I don't think the carbon tax is going to last beyond this year. I think I've told you guys this much. I actually put that in my 3 reckless predictions for Canadian politics. You can check that out after this if you want. But look, everybody hates the carbon tax right now, even the liberals. It has been a whip to beat Justin Trudeau with for at least 2 years now, certainly since Pierre Poilievre became the Conservative leader. So it's got to go. The carbon tax has to go. The Liberal leadership candidates are saying they would remove it. And I agree with Pierre here. That's rather disingenuous. Some people have suggested that Pierre somehow doesn't believe in climate change because of his stance on oil and gas and removing the carbon tax. I disagree. I don't think he has ever done a John Rostad. And if you don't get the reference there, just Google John Rostad and climate change. But Pierre Poilievre has never denied climate change. The only thing is he has emphasized more technological solutions to emissions and to climate change. But I'll be critical of Pierre here. I want to hear some concrete policies. So while the carbon tax has proven to be unpopular, most people miss the fact that the Trudeau government has actually invested a lot in things like lithium-ion battery manufacturing, for example. And with Pierre, I think what plays to his advantage here is that Canadians are a lot more focused on the cost of living right now. But the fact is, some people in this country still care about climate policy. Yes, the carbon tax is unpopular, but the Liberals at least tried some other stuff that I think frankly doesn't get talked about enough in terms of exploring technology solutions. Also, if you kind of think critically about it a bit more, focusing on clean energy doesn't necessarily mean we throw away oil and gas. Now, that would be dumb for a country like Canada, right? Oil and gas is our major export. But I think that beyond global warming, there's some economic benefit to positioning ourselves for the future that way. Because like it or not, oil and gas is not going to be here forever. I mean, we expect it to be here for the next 30 or so years, or maybe even more than that. But oil and gas is not going to be here forever. So there is an economic benefit to positioning ourselves for the future, right? Just think about this for a sec. This was exactly what China did to position themselves as the world's factory in the late 70s and the early 80s, right? They anticipated where the markets were going and built enough infrastructure and essentially started building their supply chain so that they would be ready for the future. So, this next moment is the part you've all been waiting for. So let's get into that real quick. No delay.
On his first day on the job, President Trump signed an executive order, the U.S. government only recognizing 2 genders, male, female. They're unchangeable. If elected as prime minister, is that something that you're going to kind of walk in line with, or what are your feelings on that executive order?
Well, I don't know. Do you have any other genders that you'd like to name?
Me personally?
Yes.
I'm just asking more so if you're in line with what he is saying. Do you agree with what he's saying? Is that something that you would be lockstep with if elected as prime minister?
Well, I'm not aware of any other genders than men and women. I mean, if you have any other that you want me to consider, you're welcome to tell me right now.
Well, there's personally, I am a man. As people who say cis man. There are people there who, they say they're gender neutral. Well, you are a man, yes. There are people there who say they're gender neutral. Yeah, they say they're gender neutral. They're a trans person. Is that something that you would recognize here? Whereas in the States, at least with their U.S. government, the way they're seeing it, there's only 2.
I'm only aware of 2, but I mean, if you come up with another list, then you're welcome to do that. But I'm aware of 2. And as far as I'm concerned, we should have a government that just minds its own damn business and leaves people alone to make their own personal decisions. That's the kind of government I'm going to run.
And with that, the current government, they currently have passports that allow people to put on, gender neutral on their passport. Advocate groups want the government, mind you, the outgoing government to ask the U.S., would the U.S. recognize these passports, obviously on their way out, if you are the next prime minister? Is that something that you would advocate for?
I have to be honest.
Yeah.
I have to be honest with you. I just saw your segment on homeless encampments that are popping up all over Toronto. We've got 25% of our population in poverty. Housing costs have doubled. Crime is rampaging through our streets. I just find it to be a strange priority to spend time talking about this. My priority is to give people back control of their lives, and bring back Canada's promise that anyone who works hard gets a powerful paycheck and pension that buys affordable food, gas, and homes in safe neighborhoods. That's the promise we need for Canadians. If Liberals want to talk about different labels that, for gender that they want to put on passports in the United States, they can do that. I'm going to talk about the things that will bring home Canada's promise.
Okay. Bro, that journalist just looked like he was about to cry. I love how Pierre just ruins journalists. Like, this is not the first time he's done this. Like, you guys, obviously, this is not on the same level as the Apple video. The video, I don't know if you've seen this video of him chewing an apple while he's just absolutely destroying this journalist that was asking him some dumb question. He has absolutely sat him down here. I think there will be a meme about this. I'm pretty sure that there's a meme coming from this moment. Like, I'm inspired. I'm inspired. Anyways, look, I am also a man, since we're saying that now. I am also a man. I am also only aware that there are two genders. This is just me personally. I don't know. But I'm also aware, if we're being serious here, I'm also aware that there are people in this world who believe themselves to be trans or gender neutral. Pierre says, while he is only aware of two genders, the government should mind its own business. I say that's a great answer. There was a lot of there was a lot of zing to it, but remember, as I said, we're here to critically analyze stuff. And I'm just going to play devil's advocate here for a little bit, right? Here's why the government cannot just mind their own business in the way Pierre has just said, right? These people who are gender neutral or trans live in society, they access services, they work jobs, they pay taxes and so on. I don't think the government can bury its head in the sand on this. For example, think about discrimination, for example, right? Without laws protecting the rights of these people in this country, there are fundamentally no protections for these people. Now, Section 2B of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees freedom of thought, belief, and opinion and expression. And you could categorize, being trans as a form of expression, for example. Section 15, subsection 1 of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms ensures equal protection and benefit of the law without discrimination. Hey, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer or anything. I'm just telling you what it is. Someone needs to interpret those laws and enforce those laws. Now, imagine a trans person applies for a job and gets rejected because the boss kind of has a problem with trans people. Maybe they asked, what gender are you, or something like that in a questionnaire, and the trans person says, call me he, him. And the boss goes, fuck that. Well, the trans person can now sue you for discrimination. My point here is that the government is not able to sit this one out. I think even with Trump signing the executive order saying there are only two genders, I think it's a good show, but the real work there is interpreting what that means. So this is a really small example. Assuming you're filling out a questionnaire, I'll use the questionnaire as an example again. Assuming you're filling out a questionnaire at the airport or something, you know how they ask you what gender are you, and you choose whether you're male or female or prefer not to say? Do those go away, for example? Those are things that maybe you don't think about right now, that maybe will need to be interpreted based on how far this order is going to go in the US, at least, right? So there's stuff like that. So what I'm saying here is that there's a lot more nuance to the government recognizing more than two genders or not, right? Again, that said, I agree. There are only two genders. There are only two genders. That's the way I see it. You can choose to disagree with me, but I also am able to recognize that the government is not necessarily the government has to choose a side in terms of whether they're firm on the fact that there's only two genders, or and so any other thing outside those two are not recognized, or they do what the liberals have done. Some people call that a fast right now, but it is what it is. What I will say is that I don't think the issue needed to be as politicized as it has been. I think that's the basic reason why it's so annoying for so many people, because it's almost like top of mind. It's like this front and center of every single discussion. The reason why it's so touchy for people is that right now we're facing challenges in some might say in more important aspects of our lives, like cost of living, right? So I wouldn't say too much about it, but the next part I think is also pretty interesting. So let's jump straight into that.
Okay. And okay, you know what? Let's talk about housing, because I'm not upper middle class. I don't even know what I am right now, but making ends meet for a lot of people is very hard. So we understand some of your plan for housing, giving incentives for municipalities to building such. Canada's massive. A lot of our population is by the border. Mm-hmm. Is there anything we could? This is something I've thought about, just driving around Canada, specifically in BC going north. Yeah. There's a lot of land out there. Is there something that, if elected as Prime Minister, could be implemented that we can start building more homes, like elsewhere, yes, places where there's really not much infrastructure built right now?
Yes, this is a very good question. First of all, I just want to get out of the way one thing. I want to axe the sales tax on new homes to save you up to 50 grand. I also want to incentivize municipalities to speed up permits, free up land, and cut development charges to build. The provinces should be pressured to take their sales tax off. Those combined changes would save hundreds of thousands of dollars on each home. But you're right. We have the second biggest landmass in the world. We have the fifth most sparsely populated landmass on planet Earth, and yet we have the fewest homes per capita in the G7. We need to free up that land. Now, the federal government is the largest landowner, so I've said I'm going to sell off 15% of all federal buildings and thousands of acres of non-ecologically sensitive federal land to build. And I will be challenging provinces and municipalities to look at their land inventory and say, what could we put here? Is there room for a home? We have major parts of our land that are close to the 49th parallel, so very close to the United States, and a lot of economic opportunity that are almost uninhabited. We need to free up that land to build more homes as well. So that's how we're going to do it. Get out of the way, cut the taxes, let the builders build.
Honestly, I think housing and axing the tax are Pierre Poilievre's strongest policy positions. He speaks about cutting bureaucratic red tape and freeing up government land and build, baby, build. But I will be a little bit critical here because we're here for the balanced view after all. I will say this. Selling off government land does not necessarily translate to affordable housing. You can just picture private developers buying up all the land and trying to maximize their profits again. You're right? All they have to do is that they just build whatever it is or build in whatever way helps them make the most money. And there's also the chances that people are going to speculate on the land, right? Hold on to the land and wait for the price to go up. Yeah. So there are policy decisions that need to go with that idea of making land available to ensure that the homes do get built and stay affordable for Canadians. But I like the idea, I'm not going to lie. But beyond his housing proposal, I also like his proposal on providing incentives for drug recovery centers. That part, it wasn't in this interview, but the idea was essentially to give financial incentives to rehab centers based on their success rate in getting people clean. So he feels the current approach of harm reduction does not incentivize people to get addicts clean. So I think that's interesting too. I think it is certainly a different approach to what we're currently doing, especially here in BC, right? Anyways, that was the interview. And as I say, I think this was Pierre Poilievre's best interview so far. But let me know in the chat, what do you think? Which of Pierre Poilievre's policy positions do you like the best? And what are you still looking to see from Pierre Poilievre? I mentioned about climate before. What do you think he's missing in his policy package? What would it take to convince you to vote for Pierre Poilievre? I'm not saying you have to. Obviously, there's other options that will become available in due time. But you know what else I'm looking to see from you, though? You at home. I'd love to see you subscribe and join the conversation when I post new videos. I'll see you next time. Take care, guys.